Benito Mussolini was an Italian politician and journalist who founded the National Fascist Party. Before Mussolini was a fascist, he was a socialist, until he was kicked out of the party when he started supporting Italian entry into World War I. Mussolini founded the National Fascist Party, also known as PNF. Italy was angered by the lack of land given from the Allied powers after World War I, and from this, the socialists and fascists gained more support from this. Tens of thousands of black shirts marched on Rome on October 28, 1922. From this, Mussolini became the Prime Minister of Italy. Mussolini was very popular, and people hoped that Mussolini could fix the country's problems. Eventually, in 1925, Mussolini, the Prime Minister, became the head of government and a dictator. The new regime upheld the high propaganda of Mussolini. Mussolini wanted to fix many things, first and foremost, the economy, as Italy's industries were far behind the great powers of the world. Also, Mussolini wanted to be more self-sufficient in grain production and to make the lira, the Italian currency, stronger.
Like Hitler, Mussolini's first acts made him immensely popular. Massive programs of public works provided employment and transformed Italy's infrastructure. Corruption was rooted out and the mafia more or less eliminated.
From Mussolini's action, Italy was self-sufficient in grain production, and the Italian currency got stronger, allowing importing certain resources that Italy lacked to be cheaper, like oil. Also, Mussolini made a deal with Pope Pius XI. As the Pope didn't recognize Italian sovereignty over him, Mussolini made a deal. He gave the Pope some money, and the Pope would stop openly criticizing the fascism in the Vatican. They agreed, and in 1929, Vatican City became the smallest country.
Of Mussolini himself, in formal court dress, befitting an audience by His Holiness. Preceded by the famous Swiss Guards in their uniforms designed 400 years ago by the great Michelangelo himself, the high papal court of the Vatican conducts the premier down the beautiful Raphael Gallery. It's a most impressive gathering to celebrate a historic event, the cementing of relations between church and state in a conference that ends with mutual expressions of goodwill. It's the third time Mussolini has visited the Vatican, once to sign the treaty and hand the Pope $92 million indemnity, and the other time to attend the marriage of his daughter, Edda. Incidentally, the honors shown Mussolini by the Vatican were unusual and a rare tribute. He was received not merely as Premier of Italy, but as Chief of the Italian state. And a good time was had by all.
Mussolini's government encouraged people to take up sports and urged women to have more children. This endurance that Mussolini desired from the Italian people would, in Mussolini's mind, help uphold his previous promise in rebuilding the strength and the dominance the Roman Empire once had. Italy had eventually invaded Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia.
Al benessere, alla potenza e alla gloria! Black men, the bugle call, come on, come all the drums are beating and the bugle call, come on, come on, don't mind what Mussolini says, let us march in battle array, and take a gun in our hand and defend the Ethiopian war, declare.
At the League of Nations in Geneva, the Emperor went to plead Ethiopia's just cause. The League, fearful of a shadow which would turn into the Second World War, did nothing. Shamefully, the great powers left Ethiopia to Mussolini and the Emperor to lonely exile in England.
Mussolini also sent volunteers to fight in the Spanish Civil War. Eventually, Mussolini had Hitler's support, and Germany over time had stronger relations with Italy. They believed that Europe would revolve around the Rome-Berlin axis. This is how the Axis powers got their name in an agreement formulated by Italy's foreign minister Galeazzo Ciano. Informally linking the two fascist countries was reached on October 25th, 1936. It was formalized by the Pact of Steel in 1939.
At Hitler's headquarters, the comedy of errors reached a peak of buffoonery as Muzzo tried oh so hard to look his former self in front of Mr. Schicklgruber.
Before this, however, Italy did not agree at all with the annexation of Austria. Austria was a fascist state as well, one with which Italy had good relations. Italy feared that after Germany annexed Austria, it would start demanding the lands Italy had received from Austria after the First World War. For example, South Tyrol, which still had a large German-speaking population. Italy even tried to form an alliance with France and the UK to counter Germany, but this failed. When the Germans assassinated Dolphus in 1934, the Italian army even mobilized, and for a while it looked like there might have been a German-Italian war. Italy's war in Abyssinia changed this as they needed German support, leading to them begrudgingly agreeing to the Anschluss on the condition that Hitler never tries to claim Italian land. Germany sided with Italy in 1939 for the Italian control of Albania. They did this so Italy had control over the Adriatic Sea. In 1939, Italy and Germany signed the Pact of Steel, which was a military pact constructed tightly which bound Italy and Germany closer. Germany made advancements in Poland, marking the Second World War. However, it wasn't until Germany conquered France did Italy get involved. Italy continued to have many campaigns in Africa. But let's talk about Emperor Hirohito and the Japanese Empire. The Japanese for many years have been in isolation and had been against affiliating with outsiders, until the world decided to force itself into Japan's door. Europe was starting to get its hands in Asia due to the Indian Ocean trade, evolving countries like the Portuguese, the Dutch, and English. And eventually, Japan started industrializing, after Commodore Perry forcibly opened up Japan, and the Boshin War re-established the emperor as the nation's leader. Following this, Japan started establishing free trade with America. Japan's weaponry, architecture, and people were starting to modernize and become powerful between the 1880s and 1970s. In the 1920s, military spending and military personnel increased for Japan. The Meiji Constitution allowed the emperor to be in charge of all Japanese armed forces. However, mostly the Minister of War and the General Staff took in charge of most military actions. The Imperial Japanese Army started a new era of imperialism, starting with Japan taking parts of China, and eventually, due to European interference with Japan's expansion, there was a war in 1904 between Russia and Japan over the modern territory of Korea called the Russo-Japanese War. Also, Japan took other territories in China such as Manchuria in 1931. They did this for the natural resources. This is when the world started taking Japan seriously as a fierce military force, as Japan beat a European nation and annexed Korea. This war also marked the conquest in Japan becoming an empire. Also, in 1914, Japan took Germany's colonies in Asia. They also seized territory like Formosa before both the Russo-Japanese War and World War I, in the First Sino-Japanese War of 1894. And in 1937 commenced the Second Sino-Japanese War. The Japanese had 17 divisions. Some historians believe that the Second World War began with the Second Sino-Japanese War. The war in China would drain the army's resources and bring a need for increasing conscription. In the 1930s, the Japanese army also interfered with the Red Army in a border clash that turned into a large undeclared war, ending with the decisive Nomanon incident or the battles of Kalakin Gol, which ended in 1939. In the end, the Japanese were defeated by the Red Army. The loss of prestige of the Imperial Japanese Army put the Navy in top priority, and the inter-service rival between the Army and the Navy was carried out through World War II. The Japanese during World War II started staging war with the Chinese, as the fire was first exchanged at the Marco Polo Bridge, and unleashed an invasion into China, sweeping into Beijing and Shanghai, and eventually advancing into Nanking, the capital of China, where some of the worst atrocities of the war occurred against the Chinese people, known as the Nanjing Crisis. This crisis was the rape and killing of Chinese civilians and soldiers. Now, back to the Germans and Hitler's plan for the British Bulldog, Winston Churchill, and Great Britain.